The holiday contrast. December, the air is cold, and the calendar whispers Christmas. In many parts of the world, it's a time for warmth, for wrapping gifts, for family dinners. But right now, on this frozen, war-torn edge of Europe, the reality is starkly different. Time isn't measured in holiday cheer, it's measured in shell bursts and heartbeats. And for one group of people, the people of Ukraine, their only gift request is a simple one, a reason to believe things will get better. Lan, as the world focused on the festive lights, a different kind of light shot through the pre-dawn darkness. A missile screaming past it over, loop at miles an hour. Its target? Not a muddy trench line, not a military command bunker. It was aimed at a symbol that meant absolutely everything to the man who holds Russia in his absolute grip. Blam, the billion-dollar scar. Now, that morning, the missile struck. It hit the colossal secretive palace on the Black Sea coast. This wasn't just a mansion. It was a monument to monumental theft, a billion-dollar fantasy tucked away near Gelendzhik. The moment that missile found its mark, Ukraine wasn't just damaging concrete. They were striking at the very image of Vladimir Putin, the untouchable, omnipotent figure. This is the story of a line that was crossed, a line Russia had sworn was absolute. And it's a story the Kremlin is desperately trying to bury. Let's look at what was hit. This Black Sea residence is no ordinary estate. It's a fortress, a dreamscape built on a scale that defies reality. The complex sprawls across stealing acres, roughly the size of Manhattan's financial district. Inside, underground tunnels, a private harbor, a lavish outdoor theater, even its own vineyards. Estimates suggest a price tag of over $6 billion. Billion with a capital B, the truth behind the walls. Here is the truth you will never see on Russian state television. This palace was built with money, systematically stripped from the very people Putin claims to lead. Think about the heartbreaking contrast. While elderly Russian citizens freeze in crumbling Soviet apartment blocks in Siberia, their leader constructed a Mediterranean-style fantasy on the coast. Kondian for years, this palace was an open secret. Alexei Navalny's team blew the lid off it, releasing a documentary that was watched over Ebet Arsers million times before being censored. Russians knew, they whispered. But the palace remained an untouchable Mount Olympus until Ukraine decided to make it very, very touchable. And intelligence sources, people connected to the Ukrainian effort, have revealed details the mainstream media often misses. The attack was executed in the dead of night using a sophisticated mix of long-range drones and potentially modified Neptune missiles, the same weapon that humiliated Russia by sinking its flagship, the Moskva. This was not a lucky shot. It was an assassination attempt on an idea Ukrainian forces had been watching for months, patiently tracking security shifts, mapping the blind spots in the protective sea-by-air defense systems. They knew when Putin wasn't there. And this is the key to understanding the entire move. Ukraine wasn't aiming to kill the man. They were aiming to kill the myth. MDA leaked communication from a panicked Russian officer in Crimea, circulating on Ukrainian channels, captures the internal chaos perfectly. The palace was hit. I am saying it again, the palace was hit. How are we supposed to explain this? He is going to execute everyone in the command chain. That officer understood that this was not a military action. It was a psychological one, the cracked idol. Why does this attack change everything? Because in authoritarian regimes, the leader's image as an untouchable demigod is the foundation of their power. Putin has meticulously crafted this image, the judo master, the man of action, the restorer of Russian pride, to Manja. But these larger-than-life's images are not made of steel. They are incredibly fragile. They require constant, manicured maintenance. The moment that image cracks, the entire edifice begins to crumble. When Ukraine struck the palace, they broke the illusion. They sent a message directly to every watching Russian citizen. Your leader cannot even protect his own personal symbol of power. How can he protect you? Krudino, a former FSB officer, now in exile, chillingly assessed the damage. He said the palace strike hurt Putin's authority more than 100 battlefield losses. Ordinary Russians may not feel the loss of some remote trench like Bakhmut, but they understand the symbolism of their leader's billion-dollar shame being blown up. The howl of weakness within hours of the strike, the Kremlin's response was a theatrical outburst. A defense ministry spokesperson appeared on state TV, his face rigid with barely controlled fury. uttering words that instantly became headlines: total annihilation. Mienzi promised that every decision maker, every supporter of this terrorist attack would face consequences beyond what you can imagine. And let's be clear, total annihilation is not standard military jargon. It is raw theater, designed to terrify his citizens and reassure his hardliners that the monster is still strong. Janand, but Western intelligence experts see the opposite. They see weakness. They say that when you are truly winning a war, you don't need doomsday rhetoric. You just win. But when your billion-dollar palace is hit by a country you claimed would surrender in, Chisar hours, you have to use massive words to cover up an even bigger defeat, a defeat of pride. NATO analysts are unanimous. Every time Putin drastically ramps up his threats, it's a sign he has just lost something important that he cannot afford to lose. Men, the broken red lines. Since the beginning of this conflict, Putin has drawn one red line after another. Give Ukraine long-range missiles, red line. Attack Crimea, red line. Strike inside Russia, red line. Ukraine has crossed every single one. And what has followed? Not nuclear war, not full global conflict, just more talk, more empty threats. The palace strike is the final proof. Putin's red lines are nothing but propaganda, a theatrical bluff. As a former CIA officer reportedly noted, Putin is like the Wizard of Oz, scary until you look behind the curtain. But the dark truth remains: a trapped dictator is the most desperate and dangerous kind. Man the voices from the trenches. Let's bring this back to the cold, harsh reality. As the palace was hit, Russian soldiers in Donetsk were huddled in freezing trenches. Intercepted phone calls reveal the heartbreaking disillusionment. One soldier, talking to his mother, captured the confusion. They keep telling us we're winning, but we haven't been paid in 2 months. We're eating expired food. And now I'm hearing they hit his palace, and we're still here in this frozen nightmare. Another officer, in a call to his wife, was even more damning. We lost 12 men yesterday for a trench we can't even keep. And he's worried about his damn palace. Let them hit it again. Maybe then he'll remember we exist. These are not rare voices. They are the sound of an army realizing their suffering is fueling a machine that only cares about luxury. Then the strategy of symbols. Why this target now? It's psychological warfare. By hitting Putin's personal symbol, Ukraine forces Russia to defend targets that have zero military value. Every anti-air battery guarding a gold-plated bathroom is one less protecting an ammunition depot. And it's also an internal pressure point. If Ukraine can hit this, what else can they hit? The Kremlin? Moscow's subways? A senior Ukrainian defense official was blunt. We strike symbols because symbols matter. Tanks can be replaced. Soldiers can be drafted. But when you destroy the myth that someone can't be touched, you destroy something that can never be rebuilt. The endgame here is not a simple military defeat. It is a political collapse. When Russians see their leader cares more about his golden fortress than their sons dying in the mud, the myth dies. And when the myth dies, the government follows. The final humiliation: Putin can survive a battlefield loss. He can blame generals or the weather, but he cannot survive humiliation. The palace strike is humiliation in its purest form, a billboard-sized message visible to every Russian: your leader is weak. In a system built entirely on the worship of strength, weakness is a death sentence. Modern history is a graveyard of dictators: Ceausescu, Gaddafi, the Shah, who all thought they were untouchable, only to discover that once symbols break, they can never be fixed. The strike on the Black Sea Palace was not just an attack. It was a declaration. Nothing, no matter how personal, no matter how protected, is beyond reach. Putin's total annihilation response isn't a sign of strength. It is the raw, panicked howl of a dictator who knows he's losing control of the story. Gelendzhik, you cannot rule by fear if you cannot protect yourself. You cannot demand sacrifice if you hoard unimaginable luxury. Ukraine didn't just hit a building. They hit the very foundation of Putin's power. And every Russian watching knows it. The question now is not whether Putin can survive this humiliation. The question is what he will do when he realizes he can't.